I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to Leadovation. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. This podcast is dedicated to the art and science of innovative leadership. Through insightful interviews with industry experts, I bring you cutting-edge strategies and experiences of innovative leadership, helping you think differently, act strategically, and achieve remarkable results. Join me as I provide insights and tools that empower you to make smarter decisions, forge meaningful relationships. Welcome to Leadovation. Look around. Everything is turning gray, and it's not just a style choice. In this episode of Leadovation, I speak with brand and marketing expert Jarrod Lopiccolo, and together we explore how design shapes behavior, why consistency builds trust, and what authentic personal brand actually looks like in the real life. You'll hear practical ways to define how you want to show up, close the gap between intention and impact, and align leaders on a shared story. Because if you don't tell the story that you really want clearly, people will create one for you. Jarrod, it's great to have you on the show. I know that you have a long history, in design and marketing with some big players like Adobe and Google and Disney. And I want to talk about all of that, but I want to start with something I've been curious about that I want to know if you could help me out with.
Yeah.
I've noticed of late that we seem, from a design perspective, that we change our color palettes, that what seems to be in and what seems to be out. Now, it seems that what's in when it comes to business, when it comes to collateral material, when it comes to even like what a house paint is most popular, even cars,
Yeah.
is gray.
Yeah.
What the flip is going on with gray?
Yeah.
Why is that so popular? And can you speak to how that affects our behavior?
I love this. Actually, so by the way, thank you, Dean, for having me on your show today. I've been looking forward to this. My background's in architecture, and actually I remember doing a color theory class back in the day, and color is such an interesting thing. I haven't talked about this in a while, but red is a very passionate color, right? It invokes action. And so oftentimes you find when when you fly on airplanes, things like that, they don't use colors of red, right? Because it's a very passion color. A lot of times you see muted colors, or go into a hospital, you start to see, pastels, like the greens and, the seafoam greens and the light blues and things like that. And all of that, because there's this, it stimulates, right? It stimulates the energy and such. To your point about, how much we've seen, we have a joke in our office. We're always saying whatever that color is the new black, right? And it's like, so yeah, to your point, gray's the new black today. If you look at my house, I have everything is painted white and then I accent colors with whether it's furniture or art or anything like that, because the palette changes so quickly. And I think we as humans, we just get kind of tired of our own things. We get tired of telling our own stories. And so we want new stuff all the time. And we like to follow others that are trendsetters. And so, yeah, to your point, gray is the new black right now.
Well, so if red connotes, or it evokes, better word, sort of that energy and that passion, why we don't have it on airplanes.
Yes.
And blue and those sort of turquoise colors sort of create the reaction of feeling calm.
Yes.
Then what the hell does gray say to us? What's the emotional coefficient of gray?
Well, I would say, I think it's neutral in that I think if gray on its own is probably not enough, right? I think if you used gray and then you have these sort of accent or secondary colors, that's where I think it can actually play really well. If it's just leading with gray on its own, though, I mean, like we bought a Tesla a couple years ago, and it's the gunpowder gray, but the rims are red, right? And they have this little red trim. Yeah, so then it pops, right? It hasn't, and so I think by itself it's terrible. With those flat sort of muted colors, I think in that sense you do need to have an accent secondary color. And and again, I'm probably hearing some of our creatives and designers saying, yeah, either yes, they agree with me, or no, Jarrod, you're wrong.
So yeah,
but I would say, yeah, like if you're going to lead with a black, a white, or a gray, something that's like absent or in total of color, I think you need to have some sort of accent colors, right? Some sort of secondary colors or tertiary colors.
I guess I'm seeing that design and marketing tells a story of strategy,
Yeah,
culture, etc. And part of that design are the colors you choose. And so I've just have been noticing that, we came back from Europe. We spent about a month over in southern France, and there was one particular town that had some really wonderful red clay in it. I think it's the
yeah,
Roussillon, which was down in the Provence area. It was
yeah,
so cool.
yeah,
North of Venice, Murano Barado, I forget the name of it, small little village with each, house and storefront had a different, very bright, vibrant color.
yeah.
And I remember just walking through there feeling something
Oh
different
yeah,
than
absolutely.
I would say walking through a hotel room, courtyard Marriott where everything is muted and gray.
Yeah,
And so if color becomes the informer of behavior, much like a strategy becomes the informer of, say, a cult. I mean, it's like say no, design becomes an informer of strategy or culture. Then your role, your work is to help support that storytelling through the
that's
colors
right.
of the design, right? Am I
Yeah.
going in the right direction
Oh
here?
yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I think it all is part of you think about brand architecture, and all of those, right? Whether it's color, it's typography, it's iconography, it's symbolism. It's all those pieces make up that feeling that you get when you experience a brand, right? And think of any brand that you can imagine, right? Those that are even listening, if you think of that Nike Swish is always like the one, or the Apple, right? Right now we think of Apple, and it's like that chromatic, style.
Mm.
It's got the bevel, it's got the, the rim light that happens to be on the Apple itself. Now you have an experience with Apple, so when you see that, it evokes that emotional response. And I think color is just one of those additives. If you think about the melting pot of a brand, it needs that. It needs color. It needs all those other elements, and then it pays off, right? Then it pays off, and of course you want it to be as consistent as possible. I wouldn't recommend brands updating their color palette on a seasonality basis, or
Sure.
matching the consumerism that's happening out there so much, right? I think there's a value in having some timeless. I mean, you think of it like the Cadbury, right? That's that purple. When you see that purple and it's velvety, you just immediately think chocolate, right? And so there's these brands where you got the golden arches, right? Imagine if McDonald's changed their golden arches to purple, it
Couldn't
just
do
wouldn't
it.
work. It just
Yeah.
wouldn't work, right?
Right.
And so some of these brands really lean heavily into those colors. Others lean heavily into typography. Others lean heavily into music, right? Or those little sound bites, those little sound signatures as well. So all of those pieces make up effectively a brand, and the emotion that you get when you experience that brand.
So companies have, personas that they work to try to attract. They've got the brand colors. They've got the whole strategy to help support that. Have you ever heard of any? I just thought of this as you were talking, Jared. Like we talk with leaders in organizations, like what's your brand for yourself what do you stand for, as a
Yeah,
leader?
yeah.
I was thinking, like, have you ever heard anybody take that idea of trying to help a leader develop what their brand is, but go as far as identifying colors?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Really?
In fact,
So
yeah,
tell
yeah.
me.
So we work with this company. It's called Influent, and they basically do executive branding. And I think what you've seen over the years, right, is that you have these internal brand ambassadors. And a lot of times now it's starting to percolate up to that C-suite, right? People
Mm,
buy from people, they follow people, they're inspired by people. And so, yes, absolutely. I mean, you think of Steve Jobs, right? It was like, black t-shirt,
right.
no buttons, right? To see him in an orange shirt would be very weird, right? That's off
Right.
brand, for him, right? And so yeah, 100%. You see it with athletes, you see it all the time. So yeah, when we work with especially large B2B companies, one of the things that they lack the most is that humanization, right? They lead with features, they lead with benefits, they lead with screenshots of their software or whatever the case is. Our job is to actually help unlock the personality that exists behind there, because at the end of the day, these B2B leaders are the same humans that are on X or on Instagram or on
Mm,
Facebook. They just happen to put on their business pants, 9 to 5, and they put on their sort of weekend shorts, but effectively they're humans, and we need to think of them that way. And so yeah, we do a lot of executive branding, and we partner with companies to help do that, to help, really lift them and make them brand ambassadors. Because like I said, at the end of the day, like, people want to buy from companies, but they want to buy from those that are behind those companies.
I know with our company, I even said with this podcast, because we changed the look and feel, this whole thing back here is not a
Yeah.
real wall. It's sort of a poster, if you
Oh, that's
will,
funny.
that we
Yeah.
put
Yeah.
in
I did.
here.
Yeah. Never
Yeah,
would have known.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just simply because my office is just too tight to be able to make something like that actually happen. But
Yeah.
so then I said, well, what should I be wearing? What should my colors
Yes.
be?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
They
Yep.
said, well, either white or black,
Yeah.
for the sake that it kind of contrasts the
Yeah.
background. So I get that. So when I talk to executives, I kind of get this deer in headlights look when I start talking this way, the way
Oh,
you're
yeah.
talking. It's like saying, like, what are you wearing? What's the color schemes? I mean,
Yeah.
let's take a look at what you're projecting subconsciously by your brand, not just what you say, not just
Yeah.
how you say it, but the look and feel of your clothing and of your
Absolutely.
Zoom background, all of that. And they kind of go like,
Yeah.
really? Do I got to get that detailed? And I think what they're not telling me is I don't want to be phony because this
Right.
is who I am, damn it.
Right.
And
Yes.
you want
Yeah.
me to put on a different color shirt, but that doesn't seem to be my brand. So, how do you marry up what is popular
Yeah.
versus what is authentic?
Well, I'm glad you said the word authentic. We've been using that quite a bit for years now because I still think we're missing some of that authenticity, right? That's why it's hasn't gone away yet, and it's not so trendy. Is because people aren't leading enough with authenticity. It's one of the reasons why I throw a newsy hat on, right, or what you call it, a fedora or whatever. But the more you learn about me, you'll learn that I lived in Italy and I wore one of these hats, and I've
Oh,
got
it's great.
stories, and and then I'm Italian. You can see by me using my hands
Using
like
your hands for it.
crazy. Yeah, exactly, right. So I do think it's important that that we don't make someone different than who they are. Kind of what I was saying about these B2B sort of executive leaders. The goal would be that they're the same person at the office as they are at home, and that's a difficult. That's quite the contrast because. They're not often that, right? You very much see there's, especially, or you could, we're on the, both of you, we just talked, we're on the West Coast. If I go to the East Coast, I probably should have a sports jacket on, right? But
Right,
they're starting to loosen up a little bit
right.
now. They're accepting jeans when you go into meetings and things like that. But the reality is like you've got, you don't want to be a chameleon and change based on who you're meeting with all the time. But you also should have some level of, if I'm going to go to a board meeting or I'm going to go to a commissioner meeting and the governor's going to be in there, I'm probably going to have a sports coat on. If I'm going to do a podcast, I don't mind showing the back of my office where you see comic books, you see, it's good lighting. You can tell right away that I work in a creative industry, right? So
Mhm.
those are all extensions of my life. But I would definitely say, like, don't shy away. I mean, I just posted on Monday about I love cooking paella. And I threw that on LinkedIn and I said, everybody needs a little more paella in their life on Mondays, and I talked about how that relates to leadership and how when you cook paella, it's a slow process. You got to watch it. You got to look at it. So I'm able to bring my authentic self, right? Because I love to cook. I love to photograph. I love to draw. I love to travel. Those should all be extensions of me. And I shouldn't try to be everything to everyone because that's not something
Mhm.
we need to do these days, right? There's enough of this population. There's enough buyers out there that you don't need to actually be, for everyone.
I had somebody else, I think it was probably a month ago on this show, who was also in your industry, and they said something similar, which was what's most compelling is the level of your authenticity,
Yeah,
not that you're
absolutely.
trying to fit into some sort of mold that somebody else defined for you.
Yeah, yeah.
The
Well,
same time, your authenticity, I was like at a I was at what was it, last weekend? I was in Minneapolis, and I went to a retirement party.
yes,
Now, again, it's Minneapolis. It was 20 degrees below zero out there,
yeah,
right? But I was thinking like the way people dressed, myself included, right? If
yeah,
we were in a boardroom, it wouldn't have
yeah,
been appropriate?
right.
Yeah,
That's
in
right.
fact, one person says, "Well, I got to leave." I said, "Why do you got to leave?" She says, "Because I have snow boots on and snow gear on, and it's so cold outside. I want to come back with something else." I said, we don't care. We want you for who you are. This is who you are right now. Show up. Don't leave.
That's right.
So, okay. All right. So, what do you have any the questions for the leader who says, "All right, I need to be more intentional about being authentic
Yeah,
while balancing what seems to be the way in which people can receive me because somebody might I might be very, very authentic in the way I'm showing up, but it may not be necessarily appropriate for that conversation, that context, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, are there any questions that you might help a person answer or provide them that could help them understand just what their brand is?
Yeah, that's a great I mean, I think this. I think about to your point, we mentioned brand. I think we can have an individual brand. I think we can have a, company brand, and we can have community brands. We can have all those brands. I think the biggest thing about anyone that's wanting to understand what their brand is put yourself in someone else's shoes and ask what would they prefer to have an experience with this brand? Do they want it to be consistent, or do they want it to be different every time, right? And when you think about a brand, when I buy from a brand, or I have the best experience with the brand, I want it to be
Mm,
consistent. When I have the worst experience with the brand, I want it to be right consistent. And when I have a neutral experience, I want it to be consistent. So I think that that's probably the biggest value you can offer, is showing up consistently, because it makes people feel safe, right? When you know that that brand's always going to do this,
mm,
you feel safe with that brand. When you know that this person's always going to respond or act or be this way, that makes people feel safe. They can predict, they can, and no longer do they have to be on their heels sort of waiting. I wonder what Jared's going to do this time,
mm,
and so I would ask, if you are trying to searching for what your brand is, I would ask, how do you want to show up in all scenarios, right?
mm.
Do you want to show up always anxious and nervous? Do you want to always show up calm and collected? Do you want to show up always polished, right? Because that one time you're going to come out with wet hair, is that going to throw them off a little bit, right? Or you're going to show up in a t-shirt versus a polo shirt versus a sports coat, so I like to think of myself as being authentic, but authentic is actually consistency and predictability, right? And so I want my
Yeah.
staff to think of me always in a certain way. They know I'm always going to approach things with questions, and with curiosity, as opposed with judgment. And so I would just ask, how do you want to show up, right? How do you want people to perceive you?
Mm,
And once you start to identify that, like, I want people to always know I'm friendly when I walk in the room. I want them to always know that in this, well, you need to make sure you can pay off, with that, right?
yeah.
And if you're like, oh no, actually I show up kind of angry a lot. Well, then is that how you want people to perceive you? If that's not the case, you should probably re-architect yourself, find a reason, build a mantra, whatever you need to do to evoke that type of change.
So much like if you were to say, "All right, but I am angry."
Right.
Let's just
Like,
face it, man. I'm pissed off right
yeah.
now,
Yeah.
but I don't want that to be my brand. So I'm sort of sensing
Yeah,
here you're saying it's
disclaimer.
part aspirational
Yep,
and part reality,
yep,
and a marriage of the two,
yep,
or the expression of the aspirational that seems consistent with what your values are, of what
yes,
you want to be doing. I had a somebody told me about a process they went through. I'm curious what you think is, whereby you have a team of people or an individual, and you say, okay, here's a question. What do you want people to be saying about you?
right.
Like
Yeah,
aspirationally, to have best
yeah,
case. Jared's a great guy, he's brilliant, whatever.
yeah,
And then what do you think they actually are saying about you?
yeah, I love that.
Ooh,
That's
sheesh,
that
that could be a
yeah,
little
that
scary, right? And where is there the gap? And then
yep,
what do you need to do to bridge it?
yeah,
And then when you start creating those sentences and words, then the last piece that I heard somebody say was, now go back to that brand statement or those sentences or those bullet points, and you cannot use words that are overused.
yeah,
Like
sure.
find another way of saying um, honesty,
Yeah,
integrity. Like,
yeah,
ugh, how
yeah,
many
yeah,
times have
yeah.
we heard that, right? It no
We have a
longer
joke
has
here, yeah.
value. It's sort of like eating, you know, dry toast that has no flavor. Going back to your paella
Yeah,
representation and
exactly.
your love of spicy Italian food, right?
That's right.
It's like pasta with no sauce on it. Come on,
Yeah,
right?
you're like,
You
"Come
need
on."
something to spice it
Yep,
up.
yep.
Anyway, do you do things like that with your teams and your organizations and your leaders?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we effectively we have this framework that we look at, and it's mindset, skill set, tool set, and we're always trying to break those three things up when
Mm,
we're solving a problem. Like, what? Okay, we have this new problem. What needs to change? Does our tool set needs to change? Does our mindset need to change? Do we have the skill set to make this change? So that's stuff when we're working through problems, we always use that lens. When we're working with clients and we're trying to get them to pivot or to adjust or to address a new audience or to add a new service line or extend into a new geo, we're always asking, okay, what are you missing in this equation? Let's look at those three different lenses. Does your staff have the skill set to sell these services and to perform on these sales? No, they don't. Okay, so what happens? We have to adjust their mindset. Okay, so let's work on that part. And that's just, and when you think about brand, especially brand, it's an organizational thought, right? There's an internal
Mm.
buy-in, and then there's an external payoff and buy-in that happens as well. But it really does need you need to ultimately to change and to adopt a brand or to evolve a brand or to optimize a brand. You really have to look at through those three lenses: is tool set, mindset, and skill set.
They say cobbler's kids don't have shoes. Are marketing companies good at marketing themselves?
No, they suck at it actually. But I will you'll be happy to hear that we have 12 principles, and one of our principle is that the cobbler's kids will always go out in the cold with shoes on. And what
Okay.
that means is we're going to treat ourselves like a client, right? So actually when we have all of our clients, Noble Studios is actually a client, and we have a project manager assigned to it, we have an account manager assigned to it, we have resources assigned to it. That allows us to continue to do our thought leadership. But yeah, to your point, no, they're terrible at it. And most of the time, and I think the reason for this is most of the time agencies are born from tradespeople that never evolve into business people, right? They're
Right.
good at this one thing and they stay doing it. And then they're the ones that bring in the referrals. They're the ones that have all the relationships, and they ultimately can't predict their success, right? Because they don't market themselves. They don't focus on themselves. And so, yeah, anyway, long story short, that's one of our principles. And we treat ourselves like a client, meaning we'll even put ourselves before a client, which is rare because people are like, oh, we treat ourselves like a client, but we'll be the last ones to eat. It's like, no, no. Oftentimes we need to eat first in order to help others, right?
What does that mean, though, in real terms? That's a
Well,
great metaphor.
what that means is an example is like, hey, we've got a deadline for Friday for Noble Studios, right, to launch this new Alex Honnold video that we did with Travel Nevada, one of our clients, and we want to celebrate ourselves in that process. But we also have another deadline for a client. We don't push either one of them, right? A normal agency would say, okay, well, you know what, our resources are taxed. We're going to have to just push Noble to next week. But instead, we treat ourselves just like a regular client. Would you go to another client and say, I'm sorry, we're not going to hit this deadline. We're going to move you by a week. Or would you ask your staff to maybe stay late or to maybe adjust what, go live means, or, that kind of thing. So we have to put the lens on as if we are the client and that we're paying for these services, because effectively we are, right? We're paying salaries to do this work. So yeah, we treat ourselves absolutely like a client, and sometimes we put ourselves before a client. We have actually called a client and said, "Hey, do you mind if we move that till Tuesday and not Friday? We just got a couple things, and they're like, "No problem." You'll never hear an agency doing that, but it's why we've been here for 23 years, right? Is that you can't put yourself last. You can't eat last. In fact, I used to subscribe to that book, Eat Leaders Eat
Yeah,
Last,
I heard
and
that,
I
yeah.
no longer do. I actually no
Yeah.
longer do. I actually believe leaders need to eat first in order to help others.
It's so much you just said that made me think about there's a book out, I think it's, Lencioni called Getting Naked.
Okay, I don't know it.
Now,
Yeah.
basically, when it comes it's a basically, how Lencioni's models, right? You
Yeah,
got
of course. Yeah.
5 dysfunctions of a team. It's always based on a fable, right? But this particular fable was about a development company, which is
Yeah,
basically was a fable about himself and his
right.
company. And they kept gobbling up these large organizations. Not no, they kept getting these large gigs that would be much out of the realm of reality. You almost would need to be a big six firm or three firm or whatever to be able to get these things. And so they're trying to unpack like what is it we're doing that's creating that. Well, one
Yeah,
of it was kind of to your point, what would be is like being able to serve yourself in the same way that you would serve your client.
yeah,
And that might mean saying no
right.
and maybe even turning away work
Yeah,
because it'll fuel you as an organization. And I think that that right there, what you just said is so important that you have now treating your team, your company, as a
yeah,
client. Because think about how many organizations out there that bust their butt off to be able
yeah.
to serve their clients, but they're not the product of the product.
That's right. That's right.
I did a keynote once and somebody wanted me to do something on, I don't know, service it was. And my point was, you can't serve other people when you do not know how to serve yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I
Yeah,
also in my personal life, I always say too, I think you need to be mentally healthy, physically healthy, and financially healthy. If those three things are out of, alignment, mind you, there's a lot more other categories, right? When
right.
you throw family and community and all these other things, but you personally, if you don't have those three things sort of in lockstep with each other, how can you help others, right?
Right.
Because you're gonna be helping others, but you're worried about, well, I can't pay my bills, or you're gonna help others. You're like, I don't feel well because I'm overweight, I haven't eaten healthy, I haven't slept well,
Yeah.
like all those pieces, right? So I think it goes back to like, yeah, I do believe you have to, as long, I think your intentions have to be good though, right? If you decide I'm going to feed myself first, I'm going to eat before everyone else, but you do it and then you get full, right? And you don't help anybody else. Well, then yeah,
Yeah.
you probably
Yeah.
should eat last, right?
Yeah.
But
Right.
but the,
Right. Yeah.
but the fact is, if you do, if you treat yourself well first, and your intent is to help others, now you have all the fuel, right? You can go longer, you can sustain longer than others in that moment. And so I believe that yeah, you have to treat yourself better than you a lot of times treat others because it allows you to treat others better. But if you put yourself last, at some point you're going to burn out. At some point you're gonna
Totally.
build animosity. At some point you're gonna start to feel regret, right, and hate and fear and all these other pieces. But if you treat yourself first, then you can treat others. And I think the same for businesses. I think it's really important that you make sure you have a healthy business first before you help others.
True case in point, just to reiterate what you said, we're doing a lot of work these days with Blue Zones, which is not just a community base, but
I
the
love that.
organization that does healthcare. So Blue Zones
Yes.
Health, and they do a lot of work to make sure that they are walking the talk from a standpoint of, are we actually living this?
Right. Yeah,
The power of
absolutely.
nine. Are we really doing this, or are we
Yeah.
just talking about it? So I have great respect for them. Obviously, it's a work in progress. And then I interviewed a gal also who was the number 2 person for Zappos back in the
Okay.
Tony Hsieh days.
Yeah, sure.
And people lined up to go and try to be a part of that organization. They always have like one person was hired and like 50 would be applying. Like that culture during its heyday was so attractive.
Yes.
We're selling shoes,
I
ladies
know.
and gentlemen. Come on.
I know.
Over the phone before we had video.
Yeah.
And yet
Yeah.
that culture just permeated and
Yeah.
people loved it. So it was the fact that we were serving ourselves, the organization was,
That's right.
and it reverberated well beyond just simply the shoelaces that they were putting on shoes. It was the way in which people wanted to be a part of that. I want to
Yeah.
be like you guys.
Yeah, that
I'll
culture.
work with you. I will buy your stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm glad you mentioned Zappos. They're down in Vegas, right? We're in Nevada.
Yeah.
And actually, Dr. David Vick, who is actually in the Bay Area, he was their head. They called it the culture king, and
Yeah.
he was basically head of HR. And so you can imagine this was like a flat organization. They believe that you didn't have to go up to your manager. You can go all the way to the top. You can
Right.
go right to Tony Hsieh, the late Tony Hsieh.
Right.
And there was just something really exciting about that. Also, shoes, right? Shoes. They tackled an industry that had such a hard, like such a dirty return policy, right? Like as soon as you walk out the door, those shoes they're done, right? They're dirty. You can't bring them back. You can't. Where they had this return policy, you ship them back in, order another pair. And so yeah, there's just the whole culmination of like solving a problem in the industry and then doing it in a different leadership style. It just really worked. And I think they were the first company to sell at a billion, or fastest company to get to a billion and sell,
Mhm,
or something like
mhm.
that. So yeah,
They got bought out by Amazon, but was curious
yeah.
about that whole thing was that part of their agreement by being bought out by Amazon was we'll join you, but you cannot touch our culture.
Yeah, there you go. And it makes sense
And
because at the end of the day, and I said this earlier, people buy from people. People are inspired. People are the variable behind any company, whether you're a professional services company, whether you sell experiences, whether you sell services or even goods. People are the variable, and you buy from companies you've had good experiences from, right? I love Patagonia. I love REI. Every time I buy from them, I have a problem. I bring it in.
yeah,
There's no issue there. The people are super friendly. I love eating In and Out, right? Because at the time when In and Out here on the West Coast, the burger joint, you know, uh, they paid people more than any other fast food place,
truly.
and everyone
Yeah,
was so kind there, and they were just so friendly, and you could see that they had a good culture. I think that's one of the things that we've really strived to do is have an unreasonable culture. That we
yeah,
that we care so much. I mean, my wife and I started this company, and we wanted all the benefits of a family owned business, but none of the nepotism, right? Which meant right? Because you see that, in fact, some of the best companies in the world are ones that are family owned, and some of the
yeah,
worst companies in the world are family owned. And,
totally.
and right, and so but the point is like we want to value people's personal time. We want to value their PTO or annual leave, or however you want to call it. We want to value the fact that when there is a family issue, family comes first, right? And that
Mhm.
the rest will work itself out. So we have great benefits, we have great PTO time, yeah, I mean, it's something that we've always tried to model because at the end of the day, I think culture is what separates a good company from a great company.
Yeah, and then of course this goes back into your marketing and communication ability is to communicate that to a finance person who might be, quote unquote, the stewards of
Yeah.
our finance. And of course, in some organizations, it's a little harder to make that case that you've
Yeah.
just made because it doesn't show up in a spreadsheet. It's not show up on your P&L or your balance sheet, right?
Yeah.
Where is
It's
culture
yeah.
showing up? I don't see the line item called culture.
Yeah. It's like an
You know,
indirect measurement. Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
and when you feel it and you see the benefits of it, I always think that culture, quite frankly, is actually a part of the business, not separate from. It's
Yep.
how things get done, fueled by purpose, values, behaviors, and process, right?
Yeah.
It
That's
blends
right.
both sides, right? Yeah. Well,
What?
let me ask you a question about
Yeah. Please.
an organization. Say we can sort of focusing on the who
Yeah.
individual person, how's that for redundancy? For the person who is trying to brand themselves in a more authentic way, but it's also consistent with what is needed in the market. What about like the marketing department that is seen as a shared service
Yep.
that how do we get them to be a part of the creation of strategy? How do we get them a seat at the table? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
oftentimes we're like, oh, marketing, we need a new business card. Could you guys get us a few business cards? Oh, we need to put an ad out. We need to go get a billboard. We need some flyers. So we're creating all the strategy. We hand it over. We throw it over the fence. You guys go and make it pretty.
That's right. Yeah.
How
Yeah.
do we get them? Because I'm literally coaching a person right now who's in this situation. How do we get that team to be able to communicate the value proposition to
Yep.
those who don't see marketing as a member of the group that should create these sort of strategies?
Well, so I think a couple thoughts. The first I think about is that there is still a separation between marketing and sales, right? In a lot of organizations. And first of all, those two, no matter what, those two need to come together, right? They need to have like that symbiotic relationship because people that are on the front line doing the sales, they know what their competitors are doing. They know from the buyer what they're interested in, how they're being perceived. Most of the time now, buyers come to the table with about 70% of the information. They've already done their homework, they've looked
Mm.
you up, they've read case studies, they've looked at your brand, they looked at reviews, they've tried you on, right? And and that's the marketing side, right? And it's because people are savvy enough and they have the resources to go and do this type of research, and now you've got all the AI, sort of generative engines. You can just go into ChatGPT, go into deep research, drop in a few prompts. You can even use ChatGPT to build you a prompt to do deep research. You've got a lot of information on that company that you're going to go and have a conversation with. So more than ever, I think marketing needs to have a seat at the table with not just on their own, but also with sales. And so whenever we get into these big companies, you mentioned some of the big companies we work with, we're even finding some of them, they keep those two sort of disciplines separated. And our first thing is that no, we got to bring those together because what the marketing generates in terms of what we call marketing qualified leads or MQLs, they need to come in and be converted into SQL, sales qualified leads. And then we need to know if those salespeople actually closed that business. And if they did close that business, then they need to get that back to marketing and say, continue to do what you're doing. Stay in those channels, stay with those messaging, stay with that budget, and everything else. Or if all of a sudden every one of the sales qualified leads that come through are not actually getting to conversion and closing, that same information needs to come back to marketing. Otherwise, you're just spending that money. Now, I will say that's one of the biggest issues that I see is they don't have those two things aligned. The biggest issue that I see, and it is really about brand, it's about companies defining their vision and their mission and their why. Why do they even exist in the first place? And I would say that's for anyone that's listening to this podcast. If you run your own business or you're a leader, you better know why that business exists, right? And because everything comes off of the why. Once you have the why, then your pillars come from that. Your principles come from that. Your tone, all the things we talked about before. How you show up, against your comp set. And then it goes down into the actual like indirect and or direct impacts that you can make with your teams. So that's what I would say is like start with the why, make sure you've got that, and then do make sure that marketing and sales has a seat at the table because they're the ones that are going to help drive any of the change. If you want to grow, they're going to allow you to grow. If you want to just stay and maintain and work on margins, well, then you need to make sure that your client churn or your client attrition rate is really, really low. And you might have to do that by doing some brand advocacy, and you got to then use marketing to engage your customers, keep sending them stuff on a weekly or monthly basis so that they stay and they renew with you. So yeah, I would say marketing and sales, those two need to be hand in hand, and they really need to align with the why you exist as a company, and then that ultimately align with the mission that your company is going through right now.
Mm. I'm thinking about it's like a translation thing, the way you're describing it. When working with a CFO, for example, their struggle is being able to speak finance into mission so
Yeah.
that we understand why we are having these budgetary conversations, but we can link it back to mission. We can link it back to purpose. I
Yes.
think the same thing, I'm just sort of restating what you said, Jared, but
Yeah.
marketing speaking into finance or speaking
Oh
into
yeah.
strategy. Like if we do this, healthcare analogy, right? If we do this, what we're focusing on is getting more patients to our hospital than the competitor, right?
That's
That's
right.
our
Yeah.
focus, right? And we
Yeah.
might be able to actually track that. Or if we do this, we'll be able to get more referrals from doctors into these organizations, whatever. And
Yep.
so now all of a sudden, if I'm a CEO, I'm going like, well, that's exactly what we want.
Yeah.
I didn't know that now all of a sudden marketing is speaking my language.
Yes.
Why don't you come on in, grab a donut, grab a cup of coffee? You can sit around the table with the rest of us as we create strategy.
Yeah, it's also important. I think, like what you were saying, if they're not at the table and they don't know what's coming, they don't know how to prepare for that. They're going to think differently. They're going to say, "Well, how are we going to show up in that event that's coming, or how are we going to show up with that merger or that addition of service?" And so they're going to think a little bit differently. So, like, I think you really don't want marketing to be reactive, and that's what marketing's been for so many years is sort of reactive. And now I think they really deserve a seat at the table. It's funny you mentioned the CFO and I will call it the CMO. So Chief Financial Officer, Chief Marketing Officer. I was at the Cannes Creative Festival. We go there every year, and I was there last
Oh, in
year.
Vegas.
No, this one's actually in Cannes, France.
Oh, sorry,
Cannes.
different. Oh, well,
Yeah,
that's a
so
little better.
it's literally the number one, a creative agency, brand, show, event, conference you could ever go to, and it's like every meaningful brand is there. And we a couple years ago just said, you know what, we belong there and we need to be
Yeah.
there. And I will say that we do belong there, which is great. But I was sitting in the audience and it was McDonald's, right? And I'm not a big fan. I ate McDonald's when I was a kid. I eat McDonald's once a year. And it's usually the morning after our holiday party because I'm hungover and I eat a few of those sausage
And it's
McMuffins.
2 in the morning, and yeah,
Yeah, literally that's it. But so I'm not the biggest fan of it, and so but I'm sitting in this audience, and it was the most incredible panel. It was the CMO of global, not just one country, but the global McDonald's brand, and it was the CFO of the global McDonald's brand, and they were both talking about the relationship that they have, right? When they roll out, for instance, a campaign, well, they have to translate their campaigns into each market, right? And an example would be, I'll use the Hispanic market. The Hispanic market, when you're selling to them, they're very much like, I've earned this, right? Because they put this hard work in. When you sell to, say, for instance, the American market, we talk about we deserve this, right? Which is kind of shitty, but it's just what it is, right? And so, but they're
we
just,
deserve a break today.
yeah, we deserve a break. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Where they're
Yeah.
like, hey, I earned this. I worked my butt off for it. So what's interesting though is it's very costly to do that translation, and to sort of localize these campaigns. So what they've done is they've picked the specific feeder markets that they know they can be the most consistent with those campaigns. And if that campaign pays off, right, from the CFO standpoint, they get green lit then to take it into these other
Mm.
markets that cost more for them to actually translate into. So
Yeah.
they're having this really healthy symbiotic relationship where they're using test markets to test this new campaign creative. If the campaign creative doesn't roll out really well in these other top markets that usually adopt quite similarly, they don't roll it out to the rest, and they then come up with a new campaign at
Mm.
that point. And so that's where you have the finance and the CMO working together, because basically the CMO wants to know that, hey, we created a campaign that's going to roll across the world and it's going to be the most effective, not just because it's going to drive consumerism, but it's also funny and it's clever and everything else. But it's got to work in all markets, right? And that's what the CFO's looking at. It's like, well, hold on, that campaign's really, really expensive to translate into these other markets because it's not part of their culture. They don't recognize it. They don't understand it. So now we have to move into more of an education with that market as instead of just having them just consume, that campaign. And so I just love that. I literally had more respect for McDonald's coming out of that
Yeah,
event because
I bet.
I love the relationship that they created. And I think that actually that could be something that most big companies can look at, is how do you get the CFO and the CMO talking together, because they actually all want the same thing. It's just the CFO comes off stiff and cold and all I care about is money. And the CMO comes off like, all I care about is doing a really fun, creative campaign that I can win awards with. When you
Yeah.
can find that middle ground, everyone's happy.
Where do you see change management falling into this whole mix? Because as you talk about, basically marketing is
Yeah.
the art form of communication, and the end result of communication at some point is some sort of change has
Yes.
happened.
Yeah.
New behavior. I bought, some McDonald's fries or
Yeah.
whatever it might be. So what I've noticed is we don't really have a lot of organizations that have really taken on the change management process and linked it to strategy and
Yes.
linked it to marketing. What are you seeing? And do you have any recommendations about now bringing those different distinctions together?
Well, I'm going to say something that I think sounds quite obvious, but it's one of the number one things that's overlooked when it comes to change management, and I
Mm,
think it's about setting the context. I think it's really critically important for those internal, when you're going through whatever that change management is. We're going to be merging with another company. We're going to be adding new services. We're going to be expanding into a new geo. It's so important that you get that internal buy-in by setting the context, right? Because then they get it. They're like, oh, it makes sense. I know why we're doing this. But a lot of times people try to just focus on the timeline and they want to get to the end result and they want to get there as fast as possible. And they miss this moment of bringing people along. But that part of bringing people along is actually providing them the context. And that will solve almost every single change management problem that you ever see, or why people aren't adopting, or why they're not, latching on. Why aren't they seeing what I'm seeing? And a lot of it is that you're not spending enough time to provide the context.
So I get the context, and I 100% agree with you on this. It's more of an and than a but.
Yeah.
There is this so much of what causes us to change our behavior is subconscious. We are
Yeah.
not aware of it. What is it? 50, 80, or 80,
Yeah.
90% of our decisions are being made by our unconscious or subconscious mind.
Yeah.
And so some of these images, some of these things that we see evoke a subconscious or unconscious trigger that then causes us to make a decision that we're not even aware of why we
That's
were
right.
making the decision. We just know we are.
Yep.
It just sort of feels right to be able to get whatever we're getting, and we're being triggered by images and graphics and messages and jingles and all sorts of stuff.
Yep.
So if that's the case, then I guess my question then is, do we have strategies for how to do that? Like how do we bring motivation? What is the secret fast sauce for motivating a person to make a change for something they haven't normally done? Buying something, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, well, I think it comes down to, in the absence of a story, we'll create one. So it's our job as brand
Uh,
architects, and we have to story tell, and we have to story
that's a
tell.
quotable quote, by the way, Jared.
Well, thank you.
Say that
Hey,
again. That means in the absence of a story, we will create one. That's really
we'll
good.
create one. So it's our job to make sure that we are consistently telling the story that we need others to know and hear and adopt. And that's part of also that context setting, because they won't make it. They won't make the connection necessarily, right? We all are built of different experiences and perspectives. And, I grew up with the, divorced family, a huge Catholic family, Italians, loud noise. Even though I'm a white male, I'm very different than another white male, right? That maybe grew up. I also grew up as a raw entrepreneur. And so, like, you got to realize that everyone has different perspectives. And so the best thing we can do is get into alignment. And alignment means we have to story tell, and we have to consistently tell that story. And so when I think about change management as well, you can't have one side of the company telling a specific story, aka the CFO, and you can't have the other side of the
Right.
company telling another story, the CMO, right? Everyone has to tell the same story. Everyone does. And because then at that point, everyone gets the context, they get the root, they get the why. And a lot of times they'll either self-select out or they'll self-select in. But they'll know, they'll have the knowledge, they'll have the education, and then they can move forward.
That's what I don't see enough of, what you just described, with C-suite people is like leading a meeting, a decisions have been made. Let's take 5 minutes to all get on the same page with the
Yes,
talking points.
that's exactly right.
We all
Yeah.
go off and we have our own way of telling that story, but again, the nuances make it all sound like we have different stories.
And you can't do that. You really can't.
Oh,
It has to
Right.
be, yeah, you just can't do it. I mean, and I actually have a unfortunate prediction. I think that this year we're going to see more layoffs with the adoption of AI, with just
well,
all that
just
stuff, right? Yeah.
what happened just today? I mean, what is it, to the 28th? Another 13,000 people were let go over at Amazon,
Yeah.
corporate, white
Yep.
collar
Yep.
people. That was the
Cloud.
second time they've done that.
Second round, yep. And so I
Yep.
think we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think in those really critical moments when things happen very, very quickly, you have to get aligned on the story and you have to be consistent in every channel and say that story. And that again, that's brand messaging, right? At the end of the day,
Yeah.
you want to make sure in the best of times and the worst of times, you're consistent. And I think that goes back to just everything we've talked about is that consistency and that storytelling. And I think that a lot of people don't spend enough time on that. They spend time in where we want to be and where we're going to go, as opposed to like being a part of that journey. The journey is just as important as the destination.
So to tie this off, Jared, you kind of alluded to it earlier. What is your brand that you want us to remember you by?
I have thought a lot about as I'm getting older. I'm 45 now, but I've been an entrepreneur for
Oh, you're so old.
I know.
Oh
Well,
my God.
there's some
Pull out
great.
the
Hey,
violin.
hey, I know. Pull the violin in. Where's the cheese? We
Sorry,
did talk about wine.
it's all
We
about
did
context, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's all context. I feel like I've lived a few lives in this one, but
Okay.
but I guess my point in bringing that up is that I want to be remembered in my brand as someone who creates meaningful connections with anyone and everyone, right? So
Mm.
so when I get into an Uber, I don't just quiet sit in the back seat. I loved when Lyft launched and they did the whole like ride in the front. You're not a passenger. You're a friend. That kind of thing. I always rode in the front. Probably annoying to the driver, but I just love to talk. I love to talk to people. I love to learn about this. I subscribe that this is our only life that we have, and I want to just spend my time so wisely, meaning with the right people and having the right conversations and finding that authentic connection. And then longer we'll talk, Dean, we're going to find out that we like a lot of similar things. And I think that's the case with most humans, is that even if we are politically divided, we will find something in common that we both are passionate about. And I feel
Yeah.
like if you're curious and you care, you'll build a deep, meaningful connection. And that's what I want to be known for, is that I have built great, meaningful connections throughout my entire life.
I think a mission accomplished, my friend.
Yeah. Well,
You
thank
said
you.
it that way. It's been great. So let's talk about the real important stuff.
Okay, let's do it.
What's your
What's
favorite town in Italy?
well, I used to live in Turin, Italy, so I'm
Okay.
partial to that. However, and this is gonna, and I'm a world traveler, and I mean this, like I love third, fourth, tiered cities, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Cinque Terre in that little region is one of my most.
Really?
I know, it's so touristy, and you know what it is. I just have
Beautiful,
so
though, going back to color.
it's going, yes, it's colorful. I love going there off season. So that's what I was going to say. I don't like going in the summer.
Mm.
I've been there in February, and when it's all, the doors are shut and there's only one restaurant open, and I'm there and I'm quiet, I'm talking with you, and I'm talking to them about, hey, how, do you enjoy the tourism? No, my grandfather used to be here, and now we don't fish anymore. It's more for tour. But I get the real. And so
Yeah.
and I can feel the embedded energy of that town, being built in the 1400s. So Italy, I would say, I know it sounds cliche, Cinque Terre,
No.
but never in June, never in July, never in August.
Yeah,
Give
yeah.
me there October, November, February, March. Love it.
All right. Favorite Italian wine?
Ooh, like a classical Chianti. That's just
Yes.
so simple. Table wine. It's what I grew up with. My grandparents there never was a label on it. It was this round jug, and it was always full at my grandparents' house. And we as kids were allowed to drink it, which was awesome. Like at 12 years old, we were allowed to have like a glass of wine. And so, yeah, just a classical Chianti is, I'll be happy all day long.
That's great. So, Jared, how can people connect with you, follow you, get to learn more about what you're doing?
Thank you, Dean. Well, first of all, I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit. So if you find me on LinkedIn, just look at Jarrod Lopiccolo, Jarrod, Lopiccolo. I love to have conversations with people. I always just say, don't sell me anything and we all have stuff to sell to each other. Just don't do it right off the bat. Let's build that authentic connection. Let's bond on something: travel, food, wine, kids, family, hiking, camping, sushi, whatever, wine, like or you can go to our website, noblestudios.com. That's NOBLESTUDIOS.com. You can check out the work we do, the industries we serve. You can get a little flavor of our tone, what we like to do. So yeah, find me there, and then let's have a conversation.
Good. You're like a good bolognese.
Yes, exactly. Rich and spicy too.
Rich and spicy. Yeah, that's great. Jared, it's been a lot of fun. I hope we connect sometime. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, it's funny enough, I go through Oregon quite a bit, so I was just up there going up to Vancouver. My wife's a dual citizen. So we go up there often, and we got a little flat in Vancouver. So we drive right through your area. So I'd love to.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm not kidding. Look us up or call me or text me or whatever. I'm down here, or I'm up in Bend a lot, of course, because that's where I put my head on my pillow. But our company's based out of Phoenix, and so I'm down there quite a bit as well. And there was really, I tell the story, and I'll finish up with this: how these sort of conversations go somewhere. So I had a guy on my podcast probably 2 years ago, and he had this great English accent. And I said afterwards, I said, "So where are you from? I can tell you're probably from the UK or Great Britain." He goes, "Yeah, I'm from England." I said, "Well, which part?" And he goes, "Well, I'm from the Cotswolds." I went, "What? Cotswolds? My wife and I are planning on going to the Cotswolds in 6 months." And he goes, "Oh, you must come by for a cup of tea." I said, "Okay." I thought he was just kidding, right? So 5 months later, come by. I'm thinking like, okay, we're about ready to get on a plane here in another 3 or 4 weeks. Maybe he's serious. I thought, what I got to lose, right?
Yeah, right.
He says, "Yeah, come on by. We'll make you dinner." So we come on by, make him dinner. He finds out through somehow that it was my wife's birthday. They made us a birthday cake.
What the heck?
We became friends. We stayed in contact. We almost went into business with him, but we didn't for obvious reasons. It wasn't the right thing. But just these sort of serendipity things,
I love that.
And I know you're a world traveler. I am as well. We love not just the places we go and the food we eat, but it's the people we meet and the chance encounters that turned out to change your life, right?
I love that. I have so much to tell you. The Cotswolds is like one of our most favorite places in the world. We have an office. We built an office in Bristol, which is only a 1 hour drive from Castle Coombe and all those Cotswold, Burton on the Water.
That's where we stayed.
Yeah. So no, literally. Yeah. So was it, what's the name? Slaughterhouse. There's like the slaughterhouse. Yeah. So, yeah. So we literally stay there. Like we've been there 4 or 5 times. We've been in Castle Coombe a few times. Like, there's another one that we just went to. I'm losing it now. But anyway, point is I'm over there often, and we always try to bookend one weekend, and we always we always find ourselves in the Cotswolds. It's just a quintessential English cottage towns, I love it.
Can't remember the name of the town, but it's not
Stratton-on-Avon. That's it.
Yeah. Right. We're south of there. We saw a play there that once, but it was a bar, restaurant, kind of a Airbnb, whatever. Gorgeous. And it was called the Feathered Nest.
Okay. I don't know.
Remember that. Next time
Burton on the Water?
It's near there. There. Maybe later on I'll ask my wife where it was and she'll remember. The Feathered Nest. We almost went back after Christmas just to go hang out there for a week because it was so gorgeous. We didn't, but anyway, great to talk with you.
I know.
I hope we connect sometime in the future.
I would like that, honestly. Yeah. Good energy, and you're a great host, obviously. Just so natural to have this conversation. So
you're a great guest.
Oh, well, Dean, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, bud. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Leadervation with Dean Newlund. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com, or check the show notes. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. Transform your leadership success with Leadervation.